Have you ever had enough money to pay a bill but didn't pay it? I know everybody's saying yes, yes, yes. Now here's the second part to that. And when you get a late fee and you get frustrated and pay it immediately, have you ever had enough money to pay a bill? It's one thing to have a bill, not have the money to pay for it. But what I'm talking about tonight, when we're talking about accountability, how to be more accountable, I'm asking you the question, have you ever had enough money to pay a bill, but you didn't pay it? And then when you got a late fee, you get frustrated and you pay it immediately. I'm going to assume most people on this call has had this happen. And what I'm going to tell you is that if this has ever happened to you, this simply means that you need an accountability partner. Next question that I have for you guys when we're talking about how to be more accountable is, have you ever been part or the reason for a problem and admitted the role that you played? Have you ever been part of the reason? No, have you ever been part or the reason, the main reason for a problem, and admitted the role that you played in it? If you answered yes to that, this simply means that you have some signs of being someone who holds themselves accountable. Whether you said yes to one or both of those questions, you're in the right place tonight. Because whether you are great at holding yourself accountable, we all know that to go anywhere far in life, you can't do it all by yourself. It's very imperative as we go through this training call tonight that you understand the magnitude of you being able to have the skill and the discipline to hold yourself accountable. And also to go to the next level, when you can't hold yourself accountable, it's very important that you have some type of accountability partner attached to whatever you're doing. Now, here's the definition of accountability. And then I'm going to open up the lines. I want to ask a few people some questions, see if I got some volunteers before we get started. So the definition of accountability is the quality or state of being accountable, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. I'm going to read it again. It says the quality of a state of being accountable, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. So now I'm going to use this in a sentence. Now, we did get some, for those of you that are paying attention to what's going on in this world, we got COVID-19 pandemic. We also have the racism pandemic. For those that don't know, the other 3 officers were arrested and charged today. However, I did this morning, and that was before the news was announced. So I'm going to use the word accountability in a sentence. The 3 police officers have still not been held accountable for the part they played in the murder of George Floyd. I'm using the word accountability in a sentence. The next sentence that I'm going to read using the word accountability is, again, if the 3 officers were being held accountable for their actions, there would be no protesting. So now we know what accountability is. So I have a few questions, some self-reflecting questions that we're going to all ask ourselves. For those of you that are taking notes, good for you. For those of you who are not taking notes, shame on you. Because tonight we're going to give you some really valuable things on how to be more accountable. If you're growing an organization, you're growing a team, it's very important that you're going to need to start holding yourself accountable as a leader. Whether you're leading just yourself or you're leading a group of 1,000. So now I have some questions, some self-reflecting questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're talking about how to become more accountable. So here's the first one. First question you need to ask yourself is rate last week on a scale from 1 to 10. That's with Ameriplan, outside of Ameriplan. Just rate last week on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being terrible, 10 being great. The reason why this is a big one for those that may be asking, well, why would I rate myself? Well, that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't keep themselves accountable. They don't even worry about what they did last week. Now, I'm a big believer in the old phrase where, if what you did last week is big news, then that means you didn't do anything this week. However, it's very important when you're in the position of holding yourself accountable, it's very important that you track your progress. So I need everyone to rate last week on a scale from 1 to 10. Let's go. The next self-reflecting question is, what was your biggest priority last week? A lot of these questions, self-reflecting questions that I'm going to have us ask ourselves, is questions that you may or may not have already asked yourself. But I want you to begin to have this just as a little blueprint on how you can start holding yourself more accountable, because if we don't hold ourselves accountable, it's going to be very hard to have people that are following you, right? So again, what was your biggest priority last week? Next one, what did you learn last week? We all know a lot. We've all learned a lot. But this is not about everything that we've learned. This is about what did you learn last week? Again, if you're just getting started in the business, it's obviously not business related. It's just period. What did you learn last week? Some of us are thinking like, well, I don't know. What did I learn last week? This is good. For that person, this is great. You should be able to answer that. Boom. I learned this last week. Oh, yeah. I remember learning that last week. Next one. What was your biggest personal highlight last week? What was your biggest personal highlight last week? For all the sports fans out there, we have Sports Center. Sports is not in play right now. But whether there's Sports Center or there's not Sports Center, we also have highlights. We have downtime, but we also have highlights. What was your personal highlight last week? If there was an Ameriplan highlight reel for last week, what would your portion in that be? Next question. Do I tend to point fingers or problem solve? Just some self-reflecting questions. That's all it is. Do I tend to point fingers or problem solve? All right, last question. Do I spend more time whining or working? Do I spend more time whining or working? All right, so as we're moving forward, how to hold yourself accountable, right? Gave you some self-reflecting questions. Now it's time to ask ourselves, how do we hold ourselves accountable? First one is, you want to identify your personal mission statement. Ameriplan has their own mission statement. The Millionaires in Training team has their own mission statement, but we must all have our own personal mission statement. Because when you're holding yourself accountable, it's very important that you have a mission statement. You know what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, you know how long you're going to do it, you know who you're going to do it with, you know who you're not going to do it with. You know what you're going to spend your time on, you know what you're not going to spend your time on. Identify your personal mission statement is a great way to hold yourself accountable. Number two, how can you hold yourself accountable? It's reward your accomplishments and milestones. You got to reward your accomplishments and milestones, and we have to be very strategic with this part. We have to be very careful on this part. You don't want to give yourself a big reward or a big milestone, and all you did was just a little bit. right? But hey, listen, for those of you that are going to national sales director, I get it. I get it. You're trying to keep moving. You're trying to get to the Millennium Club, trying to get to the President's Club, trying to get to the Diamond Club. But hey, listen. If you get the national sales director, especially if you fast track and do it the national sales director, you fast track, get to Diamond, like what Vernell and Stephen Miller, what they're doing, these individuals are doing. Listen, you got to reward yourself with a accomplishment or a milestone, something. Right? Got to reward yourself. Maybe it's in the food that you eat, right? Maybe I don't know your financial situation. Maybe you're eating, those knockoff cereals, right? Maybe that's what's floating around in your house, the knockoff cereals, right? Well, maybe now, instead of the Froggy Flakes or whatever they call it, maybe this week you're going to get some Frosted Flakes. Maybe instead of just a regular piece of steak, you're going to get yourself a T-bone. Right? Maybe your slippers is worn down. Maybe the slippers, the cotton's all gone. It's just flat. All you just hear is cut, 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 just walking around. It just annoys people. People can't even be on their computers because your slippers is just making noise. Maybe it's time to upgrade. Get some new slippers. Get some Uggs. Maybe a name brand that you've always wanted. Get some nice, comfortable slippers. Just something quick that you can just reward yourself for getting to some type of accomplishment. Most times what people do when they're not holding themselves accountable, they're just working. Like an ant. Ants have great work ethic, but do they reward themselves? I mean, ants have been around longer than anything else in the history of mankind, right? But you got to reward yourself. Another way that you can start holding yourself accountable is review your performance. Review your performance. Right? You don't want to compare yourself to other people. Review your performance. You haven't enrolled anybody last month? Well, guess what? This month you enrolled somebody. Boom, let's review that. You enrolled 5 people last month? Okay, great. This month maybe you want to do 7. Just review your performance. Not to beat yourself up, not to celebrate, but just review. Just make sure you review your performance. Before your sponsor tells you what you're not doing, you should already know. And then this is the last one on how you can hold yourself more accountable. And this is a big one. Seek feedback from your team. It doesn't say wait for feedback from your team. Right? Seek feedback from your team. I know a lot of people when they're first getting started, whether they know you or they don't know you, when they first get started, they're waiting for you to call them, give you feedback. But what you'll learn as you're getting better in business, right, is you want to know, how did I do? How was that? You did a 3-way with your upline today. Hey, how was that? How did I do? Did I do a good job? Some of the most skilled people throughout history, they're finishing an interview or they finish a project, they ask someone, what did you think? How did you do it? Steve Jobs, right? He releases something, he's going to ask someone, what did you think about that? How did it go? Seek feedback. Don't wait for it. Seek it. I'm going to give you some benefits of keeping yourself accountable. 3 benefits of keeping yourself accountable is accountability will keep you responsible. I think it was Les Brown that once said, there's no I in team, but there's 3 I's in the word responsibility. Accountability will keep you responsible. Number 2, accountability